Thank you very much for the introduction. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the evaluation process and perhaps also give a few pointers to how one can try to improve one's submissions for application for RISE. As you all know, RISE has changed its name and is now called Staff Exchanges. And as Christina has alluded to, we are evaluating proposals in panels divided into scientific subcategories. And these panels are made up of external independent experts selected from broad ranges of expertise. It's very important that none of the experts have any conflict of interest. And we do try very hard to make a completely thorough, professional, and highly transparent evaluation that is fair to all parties involved and tries to take into account all points of view raised from the involved experts. So the role of the expert is to read the proposals very thoroughly, to apply their expertise, and to write something called an IER. And the IER is a very short, brief report where you simply state what you find are the strong points and what you find are the weaknesses on a given submitted proposal. And in doing so, we try to be independent, we try to be impartial, objective, very accurate, consistent, and also very importantly, confidential. Nobody knows who evaluates which proposal. During meetings in the central phase, it's important that experts are flexible and that we listen to and respect the opinion of our peers and also take advice from the vice chairs on board. An important distinction to make is that the experts evaluate. We do not assign or decide on who gets funded or not. We try to make a very transparent and even quantitative evaluation, which then forms the basis of the assignment of funding by RISE staff. And it is really the quality of the proposal that leads to this assigned score. And as has been mentioned before, there is a weighting of the different criteria so that the excellence part accounts for 50%, impact 30%, and the implementation is 20%. The threshold is a score of 70. And in the evaluation, we can apply scores that range from failing to address a point, or to have a poor, good, very good, or even excellent address on a given point, which leads to a score between 0 and 5. And we really try to use the full gamut of these scores. And in doing so, as a service to applicants, we do make a list of what we find are the strengths of the proposal, what we really like, but also we point to weaknesses that we encounter. It is paramount that evaluations are based on quality. Our comments should at all points be very clear, very precise, accurate, and they should be very well justified. What is also important is that we don't write a novel, so don't expect to get a very long and verbose report back. The evaluation provides very clear and short comments regarding the proposal and the outcome of the evaluation. Also important is that during the process, there is a quality control, which is intended to be very thorough, but we do rely on quality from the very beginning of the evaluation. The way the evaluation is structured, and I'm here talking about under so-called normal circumstances, it's a bit different right now during the COVID situation. But initially we have a remote phase where 3 experts are assigned to each proposal. Each expert will then write an IER, which is this initial evaluation report. And out of these 3 experts, one is assigned to be a so-called rapporteur. And this rapporteur will try to summarize the comments which are in agreement, and also summarize which comments need further discussion. And that is summarized into a so-called draft CR, which is a report. And during this process, there is a vice chair assigned to the project, and they oversee the process. They perform quality control also during this initial phase. And the vice chair provides support for experts, and that's particularly important for people who are new to the process and haven't worked in this evaluation field before. It's also important to note that all this work is done in a system called CEP, which is a proprietary system for the European Commission, and it's a closed encrypted system, so that none of these proposals and documents relating to it are floating around in emails or the like. They're all contained within a secure system. Usually we have a central phase in Brussels. In COVID times, this has been online, which is very challenging to do. These evaluations are complex, and we very much hope, and I think I speak for all experts, that we will be back soon with the central phase in Brussels. So experts have assigned a 1-hour consensus meeting for each proposal, where we discuss the draft CR. We agree on the points that are common to us, and we try to iron out any differences or opinions. All of this is overseen by a moderator. That moderator is typically the vice chair, or it can be a member of RIA staff. The rapporteur then takes the consensus of the meeting and writes a final consensus report based on the discussions. This report is then approved by all of the experts, and the whole process is overseen by an independent observer who's also available to experts. I can mention it is possible, if you cannot have agreement and you have still outstanding opinions, it's possible also to lodge a so-called minority opinion, but that is actually rare. These meetings are often very successful in forming a consensus. The CR is then checked by the vice chair for quality control, and finally the CR is double-checked by a second vice chair, and sometimes even the chair of the panel performs quality control. And the aim, of course, is to have a very high-quality evaluation and to find any factual mistakes before they're sent out. With that done, there is a ranking list compiled, and that is purely based by the global score and the threshold. And that ranking list then decides where in the field these proposals fall. In cases of ex aequo, of course, These are assigned based on the relative weighting of excellence, impact, and implementation. If there are still cases of ex aequo, this has happened, but it is rare, then the two evaluation groups meet and they try to come to an opinion of which project takes preference over the other. I should note that ethics are addressed by a separate panel, and then the decision goes to the proposer, who is then informed about the outcome, and successful projects are then handled by the RISE staff. Some important points that we check, especially for RISE, we check whether there are any sort of artificial collaborations. We're not a travel agency. The proposal and the secondments, they have to be justified. We check whether there's a suitable division between industry and academia and countries. Does that make sense in light of the objectives stated by the proposal? And it's quite important to note that we only evaluate information provided in the proposal. We don't Google people's publications. We don't look up references. So don't expect experts to click on links that you provide in the proposal, because we don't, and we're not really supposed to do that. And that is important, that you should rely on having the proper description of what you intend to do in the proposal itself. And I sometimes see people provide links. They're not really of any use. We check for whether the proposal meets the evaluation criteria, obviously, whether it's in scope with the work program. And finally, we do not give advice on how to improve a proposal, but we evaluate and comment strictly on the strengths and the weaknesses. And of course, when you get the proposal and the evaluation back, you should take note of these weaknesses in case you want to improve the proposal in the future. Also, we look at gender issues, and it's important to note the distinction that there are gender issues that relate to the scientific program itself. If you have focus groups, or let's say if you have groups of human, let's say patient groups and so on, or population groups in biology, whether gender issues are addressed, that you don't only select a male group of studied subjects or just a female group, but also we look, of course, at gender issues in relation to the project itself. But it's important to make that distinction that there are those two. We check for operational capacity of all partners, and certainly also letters of commitments. And just to outline how we write the evaluation report, we try to be brief, concrete, not to write a novel. We state only facts. We do not state our opinions, such as I think this proposal is so and so, or it should be funded because so and so. The work plan doesn't deal with climate change, or I think that a proposal should address so and so and so. That's not what we're here for. We only deal in facts. We don't paraphrase the proposal. Evaluating is not the same as describing a proposal. So don't expect to have a long-winded introduction in your evaluation report, because we simply don't. Is it good? Is it bad? And why is what we address. Also, we try not to contradict ourselves. We can't say that something is both a strength or a weakness. It is either or. We try to avoid repetitions or even double penalizing for things. Especially, it's important to avoid comments stating that the proposal is good in this and this aspect, and then list things that are weaknesses. Evaluation comments must be either strength or a weakness. And of course, we remember that the language must be professional and courteous. In the end, the text goes back to the proposer. With that in mind, how can one write better proposals? Let's face it, there are hundreds of submissions. We've seen in the presentation of Alexandra that there is a given success rate for each EU program. It is a competitive environment. My advice would be to be concise, be precise, and make the proposal readable. And by that, I mean, be clear about stating what the objectives are from the proposal. It's difficult to evaluate if you really have to search actively to figure out what the proposal is about. It should be obvious. If you make claims, try to substantiate them, prove them, and make that convincing for us when we read. Also, it's important to justify the composition of the consortia that you put together, especially why do we choose certain academic partners and industrial partners? Why is it important that these partners work together? And also remember to have an active link between the academia and industrial partners. And finally, on this slide, I would like to state, which is very important, you need to address all criteria thoroughly and convincingly. Do not fall for the temptation to think that certain sub-criteria are less important than others and then skip over them or address them in a one-liner, because that is problematic and that will be penalized if you don't address all criteria convincingly. Especially if we look at excellence, I put a lot of emphasis on people describing what is the state of the art of your field currently. And once that is established, it's important that you very clearly set out how is your project going to move beyond the current state of the art, because that is really what the excellence is about. Where is this project going to take us, and what is the contribution of your proposal? As Christina outlined, the knowledge transfer is very important. You must outline how knowledge is going to be transferred and what benefits are going to come out of it. It's a good idea to use figures, reaction schemes in case you are in the chemistry field, tables, etc. And also remember that we are all experts in the field, but we can't be, all of us, complete experts in your very, very narrow field that you're applying for. So you still have to motivate your research and convince us that what you're trying to achieve is important. And in general, scientific excellence of the proposal must be obvious to the reader in order to succeed. When you're discussing the impact of your proposal, please be specific. Try to avoid generic statements that are difficult to really grasp and to get to the bottom of. Describe what you intend to do, but also describe how you intend to do it, and link that into how concrete measures in the proposal are going to generate impact. In general, if you can point to a concrete measure or a concrete procedure and link that into your objective on how you want to generate impact, that makes your proposal stronger. and it makes it more convincing for us when we read it. Under the implementation, it's very important to describe the management structures and procedures in detail. And this is not only important in order to have a good evaluation and get the funding, but it's also important afterwards when you're actually trying to run your consortium. And try here to be convincing and demonstrate to us that you've thought it through, how you're going to run this. How are you going to set up management structures, meetings, and also think about how will you handle when you get into difficulties, and if there are eventual conflicts in a consortium, it does happen. How are you going to address IP, which is very important when you have industry involved? These are all things that we look at, and the more thought and detail you can provide on how you're going to run this is important in terms of convincing us. Please also provide, a very thorough risk assessment. What are the risks? 3 years ago, if you had written a global epidemic that will bring the world to a halt, yes, that's a risk, but perhaps few people would have thought of this 3 years ago, and now it's reality. So how are you going to address risks such as an epidemic, or if people are somehow prevented from traveling? But also in terms of scientific risks, if your project is based upon an initial development of a new methodology or technology, and all of the rest of that project relies on that initial phase of the development, then it's a clear risk that what is going to happen if you can't really reach the goals set out in the initial scientific program. You need to address that, and it's not a deal breaker. You just have to have the tools available to address these. And also the implementation part, it really serves to give the RIA staff who are going to administer this, and yourself, some concrete measures to work with in the end. It's important that you provide a Gantt chart, which must be clear and detailed, and check the consistency between the Gantt chart and the work packages. And also it's important that the resources you are allocating to work packages correspond with the tasks in question. Just some practical advice: use clear diagrams and tables to illustrate. What I often see is tables or diagrams that have been prepared in one program, and then they're copy pasted into Word, and a PDF is generated, and during this process the initially very clear diagram becomes smudged and you can't read it, and then things become very difficult. So please do check that. The page limit is very strict. There are 30 pages for the 3 criteria, excluding appendices. And it's important to note that any excess pages will be disregarded. And when I say disregarded, it will simply in the evaluation be considered as missing. When you are asked to provide letters of commitment, it's also important to check that all of those are present and that they are dated and signed by the person who is responsible in that organization. It's something we check for. And finally, I would say try not to fall for the temptation of minimizing the font size and fiddling the margins when you're putting information into tables. It doesn't really give you any advantage if you can't say what you intend to say in the allocated space, then probably you need to think of a different format of presenting it or rewording things. And it going to extreme small font size can also be potentially a bit dangerous for your proposal, in that you may be asked to reformat it in the end. So just think about clarity and delivering the message in a very clear and concise manner. So with this, I wish you good luck with your proposals, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And I will now let my colleague Margot again deal with the question and answers, and then she will present you the support services which are offered to you here in Belgium. Thank you, Margot.
Okay, so if anyone would like to raise a question, please raise your hand or send it via the Q&A button or through the chat. We actually have some questions for Christ Glorieux. I'm not sure if he's still there. If so, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
I'm here.
Okay, hello. First of all, thank you both for these elaborate presentations, very useful. A question for you, Christ. Were there any agreements made between the partners in the consortium on exploitation results and intellectual property rights? And how were the negotiations going, and at what stage were they taking place? Were you receiving help from the European IPR help desk? Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. In the consortium agreement, I think we mentioned that we follow the DESCA form. I have to say there have not been, we didn't make patents or something, or there was not IP to be protected. We were, let's say, it was a bit, let's say, implicitly agreed that every partner can, if a result is obtained, maybe together with other partners, it can be published. So, and everything was published also. But in the agreement, maybe Monique can say more on that. So about the DESCA agreement, that let's say every partner keeps his own know-how, and yeah, there's a kind of fair play rule, I think, provided by Europe to handle this.
Yes, maybe I can add to this. Yeah, well, I don't recall specifically for this project what the IP rules and regulations were, but in the majority of the RISE projects that we have been following up on, we have indeed used the standard DESCA IP regulations. So the IP remains with the party that generates it. And in case of joint IP, there is an agreement to that it can be used for further research without any compensation to the other joint owner, and in case of exploitation, fair and reasonable conditions are agreed on for the other joint partner or partners, and yeah, I think that in this specific project, that's the rules that we used as well.
Okay, thank you very much for this elaborate answer. Yeah, then there's a question on the cancelled secondments. You mentioned that due to private reasons of the certain staff members' secondments were cancelled. Did you somehow solve this, or had a plan B for this? Were they executed later in the project, maybe?
Yeah, well, there were like some changes. I mean, and also like some in a couple of cases, let's say new people could jump in. And I have to say, in the end, I think out of the if you say 100% foreseen secondments, I think we reached about 85% or something. So, of course, then that means that in the end, the budget is a bit lower, obviously. But okay, we had a reserve margin, so it was not that this made us run into problems. So, after all, we were maybe lucky that we still succeeded to have the 85%. So, in spite of say several months of secondments by some people that could not be done, but there were other opportunities which allowed for new secondments. But of course, every change requires, let's say, communication with the EU officer, but who in our case was very friendly and nice, and so it was fine.
Okay, thank you. Then over to you, Kristian. Could you indicate when the evaluation results will be made known to the applicants after the closure of the call? How long after will applicants receive the results?
I'm afraid you might need to ask somebody from the commission that question, because we just hand in the report and then our part is sort of done. So perhaps Christina can answer that question.
Apologies, the system is a bit slow to unwind. I'm sorry, could you please repeat so that I can make sure that I will answer correctly?
So when will the evaluation results be made known to the applicants after the call deadline?
Well, they are usually at the very, very end stage. So first of all, we start with, let's say, the awarded applicants. Just before starting the process of the grant agreement signature, which is quite lengthy, and usually this happens over the summer. So basically, we will see how the process will go through now with the staff exchanges, and because the calendar is a bit changed. Usually the call deadline was in April every year for RISE, and we were organizing the evaluation after that, starting with that moment. So usually we were going through beginning of July with the ethics evaluation, and only after that, after mid-July, we could start sending the information towards the applicants, both successful and unsuccessful. So now we can estimate that maybe it will be 1 month earlier than what we used to have in RISE, because the call deadline is at 9th of March. So let's say during June up to mid-July, we could start sending these letters.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps, Christina, you could also answer the next question. Are there any nationality requirements regarding the recruited researchers?
No, absolutely not the case. No, we do not look into that. We look into the fact that the send staff member should have a link to the organization, and the sending organization has a power over the person. But we don't look into nationality aspects. No.
Okay, thanks. And then another question for you. When can we expect the proposal templates and the guide for applicants to be made, to be published for the calls, or for both calls, for Cofund and for the Staff Exchanges call?
To my knowledge, it was already published for RISE. Usually we are trying to publish the guide for applicants as soon as possible after the opening of the call. And this is what I know that the call coordinator has already done so. At least this is what we were informed about. Personally, I did not check it yet, but this is, I know that it is published. Maybe Alexandra could tell us about Cofund, because I'm not very much aware. But the guide for applicants should be there normally.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello. So for Cofund, the guide for applicants has already been published on the RIA website. If I'm not mistaken, I think it has been published on Friday. So you can check the RIA website because the guide is there, and we hope it to be publishing the guide hopefully still this week, together with the template to the Part B. As I mentioned, we have had some technical issues with that, but at least the guide is available, even if not yet in the portal, but you have access in the RIA website. But as I said, just check it, I would say, towards the end of the week, and hopefully everything is going to be there as well. Thank you.